What did they eat at the first Thanksgiving? Well, that can be a complicated question to answer, actually. Um, are we talking about the first Thanksgiving whenever the Pilgrims landed and were extremely ill prepared, and the Indians, during one of their fall festivals, the Equinox Festival, came and saved them all? Or are we talking about what that Equinox Festival actually began from in the first place, and the one that we still celebrate to this day is Thanksgiving? For the Indians celebrated their end of year harvest right at this time, and in a time of extreme starving and coming across from England used to be quite the endeavor, and people would get real sick. They'd in here with scurvy and all kinds of things, and if you didn't land with the ability to try to recoup real quick, you could be in trouble. And indeed, the Pilgrims were in trouble. And this is meant nowadays to show you that people come together, and the idea of the Indians shown back to the Pilgrims of something that they had lost, trying to be too Puritan about everything, that they allowed. Well, they kind of made it to where during the surf system, so the people that came over on the boats weren't serfs and stuff, and they weren't the people that really could get them prepared for this. These were a little bit high and mighty people and thought they were coming to a new world, and got really a rude awakening here at the very first time that they started to go into winter. So it's not even winter. And the idea of Thanksgiving is not that they saved them from Thanksgiving time, but they saved them through the winter. It was much more than the actual day of Thanksgiving. Like, they saved them that week. Well, what happened the week after that? And how about when it got real bad in the winter? I mean, what happened? And so you look into it, and they say some of the vegetables that we all say were there weren't there, and they probably had turkeys, and they had this and they had that, but what did they have? Well, it could be complicated. Like, did they have cranberries? Did they have all the things that we think that they had? And there are people that go real deep into this, but I'm going to take this a different way. Let's go back in time real quick and look at what they were doing for this festival we were talking about way back when. And you come to find out that the first festivals that were at this time were really not at November 22nd. That was considered second harvest. And so the first harvest would have been back here at the first part of September. And that's odd. But no, that's the first harvest. That's the end of year harvest for people that are farmers and doing things, and also people that are even hunter gatherers, where they're trying to get the last good stuff off the vines and the last good stuff off of things. And they leave some that aren't quite ripe, and then later you come back and do your last second harvest, and then there's a third. But it's not dictated by the stars and moons and almanac. It's really dictated by the first frost that comes, because whenever that comes, you grab everything you've got and try to make it through the winter. And winters used to be extremely harsh on early humans, all the way through to modern times, where now we have heating and air conditioning and all the things and real nice shelters. These people would really go through harsh winters. Surely through history, the stories of things like Napoleon having gone through the extreme hard winter of Waterloo, or stories of Washington crossing the Delaware and how they were all frozen out, and things that happened through that. So winters could be extremely harsh, and depending on where you are and what situation you got yourself in. Well, primordial men weren't real prepared for it, were they? Not really. And so it ended up being kind of a signal of a time whenever this should happen. And if you look back at the oldest records of when people used to do a celebration around these times, it actually correlates to the old Hebrew calendar, which kind of is odd, but then again, it shows some type of divinity situation to it, and everything, and that how there was a lot of zodiacal things that were in the Bible that really weren't evident to people all the way through, and even till now, kind of. And now people are starting to correlate dates. It's weird, but some of the festivals and holidays that they had actually gotten from being in captivity to other people and around other people. You know, they're just a nomadic tent people, so the civilized people around them that had all developed cultures, and it's kind of where they nicked all their stuff from. And so you look back, and there's even an old Babylonian tale of after the time that Sumer got lost and they lost their calendar. So this is way back. I mean, this could go back to like around 10,500 BC, but it really goes back, the records that we're talking about, to about 7,000 years ago, or maybe, close to 5,000 BC. And the Akkadians had taken them over, and their whole culture changed, and they start worshiping the moon. And there's a god back then that's a moon god known as Sin. And so this is when sin enters the world, by the way. And if you look up and study biblical things and stuff, look at some of my other videos, and it can go deep into it. But let's just look at this. Well, they used to have a festival that they knew their year ended and started not on the depth of winter, whereas ours does now, which is a sun worship idea, where you're following the sun to its lowest point in the sky and back up, and the coldest point, and calling that your new year. But they did it at this harvest time. And so it was kind of a rubber band the other way, if you will, and off of harvests. And they would have a festival where the king, now this is looking as being like Marduk worship and things way back when, and they would have a festival where he would ceremoniously die for 3 days, and he would just hang out in the ziggurat and then come back out, and they would kick in this big festival. And it seemed to start on September 1st and went to September 11th, because if you do a moon calendar, you end up 11 days shy. What's odd about that is that comes out to being a weird September 11th number. And so you look into this worship that they had back then, and this is that Baal and Canaanite worship too, where they had sacrifice and things. And so, okay, well, what are these people doing at this big festival that comes through and tries to make it for winter for these people? And you come to find out that it involves them killing off a person who they attach sin to. And they say all the sins of all the people will do that, and that'll make us make it through winter, because we'll do an atonement to God. And whenever they do this atonement, supposedly to the gods, of killing somebody who everybody put all their sins on. So what they do is they would parade a guy around, and everybody would slap this guy and stuff and put their sins on him and spit on him and do shit. And then they would take him up and ceremoniously kill this guy. And a lot of the accounts say that they would cut him up and people would eat pieces of him and stuff and everything. And this is where the whole eat of my flesh and drink of my blood crap comes from, believe it or not. And these weird pagan cults that were for back then. And so what they would do is that would kick in the whole harvest. And then they had a giant Thanksgiving where they ran it through until second harvest and third and go on. And so it seems to mimic all the way to Indians and all this people. And you come to find out that the Romans used to have a very similar festival to this, where they did the same sin thing to a guy and killed him. They run him through the streets and beat him with branches and spit on him and stuff. And that oddly mimics exactly what Jesus Christ does, when they go through and the thing. It's that same little put the sins on this one guy, and then you've got to kill him off and crucify him. And so you look at that. Well, that's the other end of the spectrum. That's the spring one instead of the fall one. And so the fall of men was when they started doing things like this and started actually using cannibalism and human sacrifice in these things. And of course, the Bible kind of teaches this, and today in our modern thoughts, we know cannibalism is very bad, of course, and stuff, and only pagans and uneducated and primitive people would do something like that. But so let's look at this real quick. Let's see here. We can look at calendars probably for Thanksgiving. And let's see how the first calendars that they had, the Hebrew calendar. Um, Let me show you that that does do the September thing, and it even pins it on about September 11th. But Hebrew calendar. Spelled it wrong. Still gonna pull it up. Yeah, here's your Hebrew calendar. And I don't see the one that I even want to use really, but let's. So here's the sacred year of Israel and its festivals and stuff, kind of on one deal. See if I can get this centered for you. And so you come to find out that between August and September was Elul, and that's the 6th month, right? El, like Bethel and Eloha and Angel and all the El names. And El is a Canaanite god, by the way. And you find that it changes from that to Tishri, which these are sacred months, and a lot of things happen during this, is the flip over here at Tishri. And it comes out at about the 11th day. But that their year is screwed up, and because of their calendar being wrong back then to a true calendar, what we run today, that they had to put an extra month in every 7 years or so between Adar and Nisan, an extra like 29-day month to try to keep up with it. And they just keep flipping back and flipping back. And so that extra month they put in there was the month that they would let everybody go that were under enslavement and do the extra thing and stuff. This was that 7 year of everything, where that was that 1 year that gets kicked that they refer to in the Bible quite a few times. So, and it tells you that each little month's got sowing and barley and all these type of things and stuff. But at first, they weren't, of course, sowing or doing any of that. They were a nomadic people that really kind of would like come steal stuff out of your garden. But so what was this worship that they did that I was talking about before with the ziggurats and all that and the Baal worship, the Canaanite stuff? Let's do just Baal worship. And you find that during these festivals, what they would do is they would give child sacrifice away. I mean, you can see this straight up. And this is that same festivals that the Hebrews are talking about. And of course, they're totally against the Canaanites in the Bible. But what you find out is the Canaanite god's name was El, and that this is the worship that they did all the time. And the other god tried to take them away from it, but they kept straying into this stuff. So what is this stuff? Well, here's the worship of El. And you know what we probably think of somebody worshiping that today and who that would be, right? But that's actually the worship of El, and the worship of Baal, his son, actually looks much more like this, right here. How could you? Possibly the old church guide wants to tell you all about this. Well, let's just go back. Balaam, the Canaanite god, and they tell you all about it. Well, this right here is the type thing they would do. It was a brass sculpture with a fire going below it, and these people would take their children and go up and throw it into the fire to try to make it rain. You hear about these primordial stories about people that would sacrifice their kids to the rain, and everybody knows that's just pagan stupid shit. Well, pardon me. But yeah, it was, and apparently through my studies I come to find out the Hebrews were doing this. In fact, in the Bible, it just tells you straightforward that they were doing this Baal worship, and then their sons and their daughters, they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. And so these people used to do this, and they actually believed that it was God. Can you believe that people used to do this type of thing and believe it was God? Well, the other question you have to ask is, can you believe that the people that wrote our Bible used to worship these guys? And another question is, if you know that the Hebrews who actually wrote our Bible used to really think for a long time that this was God, and that they kept straying away from something else to this because they thought this was God, what makes you think that they have any idea of what the real God is when he does show up? That's kind of an odd question, but it surely could probably have an answer. Well, what do they have with Baal worship? Well, they used to have this This candelabra thing like this, does that look familiar? In ball worship. And the other thing that they did was they had a symbol of Moloch and the Star of God rim fan. And I don't know, let's look at that. So the Star of the God rim fan that it tells you in Exodus they really don't want you to watch. Well, people have figured out now that that actually is this star here. And that why would they end up with the star that the one at Sinai says not to worship? I mean, that makes no sense. Anyhow, I've got a lot of answers to these questions in my other videos, but funny how that all attaches to this. Well, I don't want to go too deep into that. I really don't. I think I've gone probably a little deeper than I should, but oh, I don't know. Let's go back and look at this, because what we're really talking about is the first Thanksgiving. And now, I'm guessing other than the fact of being thankful that the Pilgrims and everything that helped out, maybe we ought to be thankful that, you know, we don't do the type of things that used to have to happen to make it through winter back in the old days. And because the answer to the question of, you know, like what used to happen at the first Thanksgiving was something a whole lot more like this than one would like to believe. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Y'all enjoy the time with your family that you have. And if you want more insight into the Hebrew God and what they believed, look at some of my other videos. But enjoy that turkey.